Speaking of eccentricities of the Trump era, Roy, do you remember Sharpiegate?
I do, yes.
Back in September of 2019.
Kind of ridiculous.
Kind of is doing a lot of work in that sentence there.
Just making up the weather.
It was just making up the weather. It was Hurricane Dorian, a brutal Cat 5 storm that was approaching the east coast of the United States. And then President Donald Trump had mistakenly included Alabama among the states that were threatened by Dorian. And so a lot of scared Alabamians, what do you?
Rednecks.
They call the local weather service and they're like, what the hell is happening? They're in a panic. And the weather service told them the truth, which is that there is no threat whatsoever at the time. There was no need to panic or even prepare for that matter. But Trump continued to insist that he was right, that the scientists and even the radar were wrong. And it all culminated in the notorious, humiliating press conference where Trump showed that weather map of the southeastern United States where the cone of uncertainty had clearly been manipulated at the top to include with a black Sharpie, which didn't even match the... Oh, yeah, if you're watching, you can see it. It's a white line, and then all of a sudden there's this little black, like, foreskin at the top of it, this little black bubble.
God. What?
In like, well, you can see. It's like you can see.
There's I mean, the description you just gave.
Well, I'm just saying.
Come on, man.
I'm just saying it was like a reverse moil. It's like you put the foreskin back on the top of the thing.
Back on.
It was bizarre. It was done to include Alabama when it obviously did not include Alabama, just to prove himself correct, which he was not.
Yeah, the hurricane was wrong.
And Trump reportedly forced the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, also known as NOAA, to release a statement supporting his bullshit and saying that Dorian, well, it could impact Alabama.
No.
This is some North Korean dictator shit. Like, where the weather is not what the meteorologists say or even what you can see out your window, but whatever dear leader says. It's like the famous George Orwell quote from 1984, "The party told you to reject the evidence of your eyes and ears. It was their final, most essential command." It's dystopian, totalitarian. It is Orwellian. So while we have clearly seen in our lifetimes, we're Floridians, Roy, we've seen the science of forecasting hurricane paths vastly improve. They've gotten much more accurate in my lifetime, certainly since Hurricane Andrew devastated our community. But now, like just in time for the science to improve, we're going to take potentially a giant historic step back. Donald Trump and the Republican Party want us to leap backwards to a time when we never saw these storms coming. We were not prepared, and too many people lost their homes and lives for no reason. If the right wing's Project 2025, which I know you've heard a lot about, but you can never hear too much about it because it's 1,000 pages long, and it's all been published. The plan is right there before our eyes, this vision for America. But if this Project 2025 is enacted under a second Trump administration, not only would official weather forecasts be banned. I'm laughing, but this is a real threat. But national hurricane and flood warnings would in large part cease to exist. Page 675 of the Project 2025 blueprint calls the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, quote, "a colossal operation that has become one of the many drivers, or one of the main drivers, of the climate change alarm industry, and as such is harmful to future U.S. prosperity." So a second Trump administration could force the NOAA to be, quote, "broken up and downsized," end quote. And if this is what the future of American prosperity looks like, a future where climate change concern is seen as a bad thing and science itself is treated as some kind of a threat, I can tell you, as a Miamian who has spent my life at or below sea level, we are doomed. Monica Medina is a former top climate official at the State Department, Defense Department, and NOAA. She's currently a senior fellow at Conservation International. Monica, thank you so much for being here on Because Miami, or because what's left of Miami. Is politicizing the weather a good thing?
Oh, gosh. Billy, thanks so much for having me on. Hi, good morning to everybody. And no, we cannot politicize the weather. It would be the worst thing that we could do in the face of the climate crisis crisis that we are up against right now. And you in Miami know it. Ask the people of Charleston this week. Even New York City and its suburbs are being walloped today by what's left of Hurricane Debbie, Tropical Storm Debbie. We are up against real weather threats. And the last thing we can afford to do is politicize the weather, dumb it down, and make it so that people don't have the basic information that they need. The average everyday citizen who relies on this stuff to make sure that their family is safe, that their possessions, their home is safe, and businesses are safe. It's crazy.
I heard you in an interview, I think, go one step further. You said this isn't politicizing the weather, it's weaponizing the weather. What does that mean?
To me, that means, I did say that, and I know it sounds beyond belief, but what it means is that if you alter the forecasts the way the president tried to do back in, at Hurricane Dorian, that map that you showed, if the president and the White House and the political teams alter the forecast, they could do it for all kinds of reasons. They could do it to gin up their base. They could do it to send false signals and get places to prepare that don't need to prepare. But even worse, they could just ignore the impacts. People won't know that it's going to happen. They get walloped, and then they won't provide the kind of aid that is needed to rebuild after these storms. So the storms themselves can be devastating for communities. And you in Miami have seen it all up and down the Gulf Coast. They've seen it in all up and down the East Coast, all the way up to New York. Hurricane Sandy devastated parts of New York. So we know that these storms are deadly potentially and devastating economically. And that the president would change not only the forecast, but then the response as a result because of politics is a terrifying situation. It's using the government against the people, which would be awful. And he did. I know he threatened during his time to not provide aid to California after those devastating wildfires, or to Houston when it was walloped by a storm. So we know that politicizing everything could be devastating. And there's one more potential impact. If they fire all the weather forecasters because of their Schedule F plans and put in there people who aren't as qualified and don't have the experience in local areas, think what that would do.
I can guess what the F stands for in Schedule F plan, but could you tell us what it really does?
Schedule F is a plan to basically allow the president and the White House and all the political apparatus that sits at the top of the government to fire all the career civil servants because they're politicizing the weather, which is what they accuse the National Weather Service of doing in Project 2025's report. They accuse the Weather Service of torquing the science and that their research is harmful because it's not fair. And so they will replace the people who are in there, who are scientists just doing their job, like the poor guy who actually said that thing that came out that says that, and he didn't even accuse the president. He didn't mention President Trump. He just said, people who say that the forecast is going to hit Alabama are wrong. The forecast is not going to hit Alabama in Hurricane Dorian. All those people who corrected the president were threatened with losing their jobs at the time. Now they will. They will not even have a chance to keep their jobs. They'll just be out because the president will have the ability to fire whoever he wants under this Schedule F plan.
You said torquing the science. I thought you said twerking the science. That's like a Miami Freudian hearing slip there. I apologize. Torquing, not twerking, Roy. Let's get that clear.
I'm glad we get that straight.
You were not confused. I was confused for the record. For the record, Monica, you're not the right person to ask about this. I should be asking the people who are proposing this insanity. But why? Why, other than, of course, the fun of the abject cruelty of it, why would someone with the power and authority to help as many people as possible want to use the weather of all things and the science of predicting and forecasting the weather against like our own people, against us, against me, against Floridians and Miamians?
It's inconceivable to me, but they do seem to have some sort of profit motive, I think, because they talk about commercializing the National Weather Service's data. So what the Weather Service has done for more than 100 years, since a giant hurricane wiped out Galveston, Texas in 1900. We've been building up and building up and building up the government's ability to help people during these kinds of severe storms and every day, just to be prepared for what's going to happen in their lives. They help farmers, they help people who live along coasts. They do all the everyday forecasts are great, but the especially important ones are these weather watches and warnings. And if the Weather Service commercializes National Weather Service data, in other words, tries to sell it instead of just giving it away for free, which is what they do now, it could have devastating impacts on local weather forecasts, on the actual services, the commercial services that add layers on top of the government's data and the government's forecasts that make it much easier for people, ordinary people, to get that app on their phone and see what the weather's going to be today. All of that will be required to be paid for. That will put a lot of local forecasts out of reach for the kind of add-on services that they do now. They just won't have the data because they won't be able to afford to buy it. You know, commercial local news is strapped as it is. So the idea that they would require people to pay for this information, much less, to pay to get the kind of services that you get now for free on your phone through these commercial apps that can then add on and charge for additional services, but everybody gets the basics. That's what I think is hugely at risk and kind of what's behind all of this. There's this desire to make money and to have people benefit. And I wouldn't be surprised if they installed in these positions in an agency like NOAA people who have conflicts of interest, because that's exactly what happened in the first Trump administration. They tried to put in someone who was the CEO of one of these private weather services, and there were lots of questions about whether he had a conflict of interest to run the agency.
Roy, I know it's hard to know what I think is outrageous and important because I always sound incredulous and my hair is always on fire. Mostly what we talk about on this show are things that absolutely disgust and or outrage me. But Monica has sort of the opposite problem. Even when she's telling us the craziest shit, she sounds perfectly calm and soothing and has like a wonderful like bedside manner. But
because she's a mom.
But let me be clear what she just said. Like privatizing the weather, weather for profit.
Profiteering.
I mean, can we just take a moment and realize, as calm as she just presented, this possibility, this very real possibility of an imminent future for us in this country, amidst all of the climate, we can't say climate change. I'm in Florida. It's been outlawed, Monica, but the governor would not allow it.
Wouldn't want you to get in trouble.
Yeah, they'll take me away to the camps to be reprogrammed. But just the insanity of what she just said, like profiteering off of what it reminds me of? Remember the original movie Twister?
Yeah.
Cary Elwes' character. This was one of the most absurd things about it, where they're just like
the antagonist.
The antagonist, because he's like he's the storm chaser who's just in it for the money. I'm like, there's money in storm chase. Like he's like, yeah, he's got all like the corporate sponsors. That was like the most ridiculous thing. But this is like, that would be like a real thing here. It would be just like, what was it, Dr. Jonas Miller in the first Twister movie from the 90s. This is crazy.
I loved him in Hot Shots.
But this is Hot Shots Part 2. So
no, it was in the first one.
The same thing is true in this Twisters. This Twisters, the bad guy is the one who takes the data that they're getting by chasing these hurricanes and then goes and profiteers off buying properties.
Oh. So it's Project 2025 is what you're saying.
This is, alert,
but by the way, wow. This is the Florida of today is the America of tomorrow. If you want to look at the kind of, the laboratory of democracy that the Republicans have had down here over the last several decades, it's petrifying because this has been the entire platform is privatize, subsidize, brutalize, okay? First, take something that is much better served objectively in the public realm, okay, subject to public records requests and people who answer to the government, supposedly, privatize it. When I say subsidize it, I mean use our tax dollars to then misappropriate that into politicians' donors and their friends and their cronies and their family members. Conflicts be damned, as Monica said. So we subsidize those private corporations. And then when I say brutalize, I mean there is no accountability. There is no transparency. These are private corporations who are not subject to FOIA or public records, and they just do whatever they want. They can hire people who are not certified, who are not qualified. We see that with charter schools in Florida. We're the number one charter school in the country. We're also the number one charter school fuel for abuse and waste and unqualified people who are victimizing children. I mean, it is a dystopian vision of the future here. Another hopeful episode of Because Miami. Monica, my last question for you, as if we haven't made it clear enough over the last several minutes, what are the stakes in this election then for places like Miami, New Orleans, Charleston, any other low-lying coastal cities, or anybody who, I don't know, just wants an accurate weather forecast?
Or a fire-prone city, or a city that needs water like Phoenix? The consequences could not be more important. I know people think, oh, the weather forecast, it's just so mundane. It's something, it's automatic. People take it for granted, but I would not do that. When it comes to what this plan says, they have big plans, and they will destroy NOAA by trying to privatize it and break it up. And we will lose the one gem of a thing that we all rely on every single day, which is our basic weather forecast. And we will risk losing the important thing that we need at these times when we see climate stresses and climate extreme weather happening all the time. And that is those weather watches and warnings. And the Biden administration has been building them up, has been adding things like fire weather. We didn't have great fire weather warning services, and now we're getting them in place by building up our capacity to predict the droughts that we know are devastating the West Coast so that we can get water to the places that need it when they need it. We need to be expanding these services, not breaking them up and privatizing them and putting them in the hands of people who will either profiteer or who might fail, and then we lose it all. It's devastating. So I encourage people to vote. And there's one ticket that's absolutely backing all that we need to do. $2.6 billion of the IRA is going to climate resilience on coastlines. We can do more, but we have to elect the right leaders to do it. And, there's a clear choice here.
Monica Medina is a senior fellow at Conservation International. You can find her on what's left of Twitter at Monica Medina DC. Thanks so much for bringing the good news, Monica. We always, when it comes to weather in Miami,
letting me talk about it.
Yeah,
I appreciate it.
When it comes to weather in Miami, it's never good news. So thank you so much for being here. Hope to see you again. We'll bring our snorkels next time.
Excellent. Thanks so much.